My friends, I want to begin today with a memory of my own grandmother, a woman who passed away when I was still in my 20s, young enough that I did not yet understand how much I would eventually wish I had asked her, how much I would eventually regret the countless ordinary visits I spent distracted, impatient, or simply too young and too self-absorbed to recognize the genuine treasure sitting quietly across the table from me. I did not understand, at the time, that her stories, her particular way of holding my hand, her quiet pride in my smallest accomplishments, were not permanent fixtures of my life that would simply always be available whenever I finally got around to appreciating them properly. I understood this only afterward, considerably too late to do anything about it with her specifically, though not, I have come to believe, too late to do something meaningful about it with my own grandchildren now. I have spent years since her passing, now as a grandfather myself, thinking carefully about what I wish she had told me directly, plainly, rather than leaving me to discover through painful hindsight. And I have spent considerable time, too, in conversation with other grandparents in my own community, comparing notes on what we each, individually, find ourselves wishing our own grandchildren understood while there is still genuine time to act on this understanding. I want to share with you today 7 specific things that emerged repeatedly across these many conversations, things grandparents across my own community consistently wish their grandchildren knew, not as complaints or grievances, but as genuine, loving invitations toward a deeper connection that remains available right now, for as long as we are fortunate enough to still be here to receive it. This is not a lesson directed at grandchildren who are already failing in some way to appreciate their grandparents. Most of you watching this today are, I suspect, already loving grandchildren doing your genuine best within busy, demanding lives. This is simply an honest, loving invitation, drawn from many real conversations with real grandparents, toward a handful of specific things that might deepen this relationship further while there is still time. The first thing, we would rather have 10 genuine minutes than a long visit spent on your phone. I want to begin with something nearly every grandparent I spoke with mentioned independently, often with a gentle, forgiving laugh rather than any genuine bitterness, but mentioned nonetheless with an unmistakable earnestness. We notice when a grandchild's attention remains divided between us and a phone throughout an entire visit, and while we understand, genuinely, that modern life makes constant connectivity feel almost unavoidable, we want you to know that we would gladly trade an entire distracted afternoon for even 10 genuine, undivided minutes of your full attention. A close friend of mine, a grandmother of 7, told me she had begun gently asking her teenage grandchildren, at the very start of each visit, whether they might set their phones aside for just the first 20 minutes together, framing this not as a rule but as a genuine request for a small gift of undivided time. She told me the shift this small request produced surprised her considerably. Conversations that felt noticeably warmer and more genuinely connected than the years of partially distracted visits that had preceded this simple request. She said she wished she had asked for this sooner, having spent years quietly accepting divided attention rather than naming this simple, honest wish directly. The second thing, please ask us about our own lives before it is too late to ask. The second thing nearly every grandparent mentioned, often with genuine sorrow in their voice, was a wish that grandchildren would ask more questions about their grandparents' own lives, their childhoods, their own parents and grandparents, the specific historical events they lived through, questions that many grandchildren, we understand, simply do not think to ask until it has become genuinely too late to receive an answer. A man in my own community, a widower in his late 80s, told me he had lived through experiences, a difficult childhood during genuine hardship, a challenging early marriage, decades of hard-won wisdom, that not a single one of his 4 grandchildren had ever asked him about directly, assuming, he suspected, that these stories simply were not particularly interesting or relevant to their own lives. He told me he would give almost anything to have a single grandchild sit down with him and genuinely ask, with real curiosity, what his childhood had actually been like, an invitation he continued quietly hoping for even now, well into his 80s, an invitation he feared, with genuine sadness, might simply never arrive before his own remaining time ran out entirely. The third thing, our advice, even when unsolicited, comes from love rather than judgment. The third thing several grandparents mentioned, somewhat more delicately than the others, was a wish that grandchildren might receive their occasional, unsolicited advice with slightly more patience and slightly less immediate defensiveness, understanding that this advice, however imperfectly timed or delivered, nearly always springs from genuine love and concern rather than any desire to judge or control. A grandmother in my own congregation told me she had learned, somewhat painfully, that her own well-intentioned comments about her granddaughter's career choices had been received as harsh criticism rather than the loving concern she genuinely intended, a misunderstanding that created real distance between them for nearly 2 years before they finally, honestly discussed it directly. She told me she wished her granddaughter had understood, sooner, that even her imperfectly delivered concern reflected nothing but love, a love that, once genuinely communicated and understood on both sides, eventually repaired their relationship considerably, though she wished this repair had not required quite so many painful, distant months to finally arrive. The fourth thing, a simple, regular text means more than you realize. The fourth thing, mentioned by nearly every single grandparent I spoke with, was a genuine, heartfelt appreciation for even the smallest, simplest gestures of regular contact, a brief text message, a quick photo, a short check-in call, gestures that many grandchildren seem to underestimate the genuine emotional weight of, perhaps assuming that only substantial, lengthy visits or conversations genuinely count as meaningful. Connection. A grandfather in my own community described the genuine joy a simple, weekly text from his college-aged grandson brought him, nothing elaborate, simply a brief update on his week or an interesting photo from campus, a small, consistent gesture that he told me meant considerably more to him than his grandson likely ever realized. He told me he wished more grandchildren understood that these small, seemingly insignificant gestures of regular contact often mean more to an aging grandparent than any single, larger, less frequent gesture ever could, since these small touches offer a consistent, ongoing reminder of connection that a grandparent can genuinely count on between the less frequent larger visits. The fifth thing, please do not wait for a health crisis to finally say what matters. The fifth thing, mentioned with particular gravity by several grandparents who had already experienced a significant health scare of their own, was a genuine wish that grandchildren would not wait for illness or genuine crisis to finally express the love, gratitude, and appreciation they may be quietly carrying but rarely voicing directly during ordinary, healthy days. A grandmother who had recently recovered from a serious health scare told me that the outpouring of love and appreciation she received from her grandchildren during her illness, cards, calls, heartfelt conversations she had never previously experienced from them with quite the same depth, left her with a complicated mixture of genuine gratitude and genuine sorrow. She told me she found herself wondering why this depth of expressed love had required a genuine health crisis to finally emerge, wishing her grandchildren had felt free to express this same depth of feeling during her many ordinary, healthy years as well, rather than reserving it only for the frightening possibility of losing her. The sixth thing, we still want to feel useful and needed, not simply cared for. The sixth thing, mentioned by several grandparents with a particular kind of quiet vulnerability, was a genuine wish to still feel useful and needed by their own grandchildren, rather than simply cared for as a passive recipient of visits and concern. Many grandparents described a particular ache in feeling reduced, especially as their own health and independence gradually declined, to someone who is simply checked in on rather than someone whose own continued contribution and wisdom is still genuinely sought and valued. A grandfather in my own community, a retired carpenter, told me that his own genuine joy in his final years came from teaching his teenage grandson basic woodworking skills, a shared project that made him feel, for the first time in years, genuinely useful and valued rather than simply an aging relative requiring periodic dutiful visits. He told me he wished more grandchildren understood that finding some small way to actually need their grandparents' skills, wisdom, or help with something, however modest, often means more to an aging grandparent than any amount of pure, one-directional care and concern ever could, since being needed offers a genuine sense of continued purpose that simple caretaking, however loving, cannot fully replace. The seventh thing, please record our stories before they are gone forever. The seventh and final thing, mentioned with particular urgency by several grandparents who had already lost their own parents or grandparents without ever recording their stories, was a genuine, heartfelt wish that grandchildren would take the simple, concrete step of recording, whether through video, audio, or simple written notes, the stories and memories their grandparents still carry, before these particular stories are lost permanently and irrecoverably. A woman in my own congregation told me, with genuine grief still visible even decades later, that she had never recorded a single story from her own grandmother, a woman who had lived through genuinely remarkable historical events and personal experiences that existed now, following her death, only as vague, incomplete family legend rather than the rich, detailed account that could have been preserved so easily with even a simple phone recording. She told me she has since made it a point to ask her own grandchildren, directly and often, to record conversations with her whenever they visit, wanting desperately to spare them the same particular grief of realizing, only after it is genuinely too late, how much irreplaceable history and wisdom had simply been allowed to disappear along with the person who once carried it. My friends, I want to close today by saying plainly that none of these 7 things reflect any genuine complaint against the grandchildren currently in our lives, most of whom, I firmly believe, love us as deeply as we love them, simply navigating their own busy, demanding lives with the same imperfect balance of attention and distraction that all of us, at every age, genuinely struggle with. I share these 7 things not as grievances, but as gentle, loving invitations, gathered from many honest conversations across my own community, toward a deeper connection that remains genuinely available right now, for as long as any of us are fortunate enough to still be here. I think often of my own grandmother, and how much I wish someone had shared this exact same reflection with me while she was still alive to benefit from whatever small changes it might have inspired in how I spent our time together. I cannot recover those particular missed opportunities now, but I have found genuine comfort in applying what I have learned to my own relationship with my grandchildren, and I have watched, with real joy, how even small changes, a bit more undivided attention, a genuine question about their own grandmother's childhood, a simple weekly text, have deepened these relationships in ways I did not fully anticipate when I first began making these small, deliberate efforts. If you are a grandchild watching this today, I want to gently, lovingly encourage you to consider which of these 7 things might apply most directly to your own relationship with your own grandparents, and to consider, with genuine urgency, taking even one small step toward this deeper connection today, rather than waiting for some future moment that none of us can genuinely guarantee will arrive. And if you are a grandparent watching this today, I want you to know that your own quiet wishes, the ones you may have never voiced directly, are shared by countless others across your own generation. Wishes that remain worth voicing honestly and lovingly to the grandchildren who, in my own experience, generally want nothing more than to know exactly how to love you better. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope these 7 things, gathered from many honest conversations across my own community, help deepen your own relationships across whichever generation you find yourself in today. Take care of yourselves, my friends, and take care of each other, especially across the generations, while there remains genuine time to do so. Until next time, this has been Eternal Flame Wisdom. Stay present, stay curious, and remember, the stories and love sitting quietly across the table from you today may not always be there tomorrow. Thank you for watching.